are coming out on this Friday afternoon to join us in this celebratory event where we acknowledge incredible social change makers and the important work that they are all doing. Before we begin, we're waiting on one of our awardees, but I think we're going to get started. She'll be with us soon. But before we begin, I want to thank our co-sponsors of this event, starting with the Latinx Research Center, whose home we sit in right now, and we are so grateful that they are willing to share their space with us. I also want to thank the Jurisprudence and Social Policy Program and also the School of Public Health for co-sponsoring this event. In addition, I'd like to thank the members of the selection committees who selected our prize winners this year. I also wish to thank the Yamashita family for endowing this important prize, as well as Professor David Kirp for establishing and endowing the Kids First David L. Kirp Prize. I'd also like to recognize Dr. Deborah Lustig for her work on the selection committee for the Kids First Prize and also in organizing this event, along with Sherry Sollers, who's probably out there working right now, and Charles Brown, our videographer. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't already, because we're taping this event. I want to first go over the order of events because we're going to have a lot of speakers in rapid succession, and so I'm just going to brief you on what the plan is today. First, we will hear from our amazing keynote speaker, Dr. Genevieve Negrón-Gonzales, who I'll introduce in a moment. And then we will award the Foundation for Change Prize, as well as honorable mention for that prize. Next, we'll award first, second, and third place for the Kids First David L. Kirp Prize, after which we will invite all of our prize winners and our keynote speaker up to this table for a time of discussion and questions from you, because they have a short time to speak, and we wanted to leave an opportunity for you, supporters and interested folks, to ask them questions about their work. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. I may start crying. Dr. Genevieve Negrón-Gonzales, who is an amazing social change scholar activist in her own right, and we are so privileged to have her speak to us today and share some of her wisdom and experience with us. She is Associate Professor in the School of Education and faculty affiliate of the Masters in Migration Studies program at the University of San Francisco. She has been active in the immigrant rights movement for many years, since the mid-1990s, and for the past 10 years she's been working with, supporting, and researching undocumented youth. She serves as founder and co-chair of the Task Force to Support Undocumented Students at USF, and her work seeks to bridge political economy, higher education, and immigration in order to highlight the ways in which migrant illegality is reproduced through the racialized spaces of higher education within the context of neoliberalism. Her work has been published in a variety of venues, education and Chicanic studies journals, and her co-authored book, Encountering Poverty, Thinking and Acting in an Unequal World, was published by UC Press in 2016. She is also a past Yamashita Prize awardee and a Cal alum, having received her BA, MA, and PhD from UC Berkeley. The title of her address today is Sanctuary and Educational Justice: Why Dismantling the Deportation Regime Must Be a Priority for All Advocates of Youth, Children, and Families. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Negrón.
Hi, everyone. I wrote out my comments, and those of you who may have seen me speak before, I don't often do this, but I'm recently back from a trip to El Paso, and I spent just one day in a migrant shelter for families, mostly from Central America, who are, sorry, something funny on my screen, who have showed up at the border seeking asylum, and after they're processed through the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they're put on a bus and dropped off on a street. So this network of shelters has sort of cropped up. This one that I was at actually exactly 1 week ago is one of the biggest shelters that's cropped up. There's space for 400 people. The day that I was there was about 340 people, at least half are children, probably a little more than that. So all this to say, the reason I started talking about this is because I wrote out my comments because I still may actually tear up, but if I just were to talk, we'd probably be here for a few hours. And also, written comments helps me keep my emotions together a bit while talking about something that is really, really important to me. So again, thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for inviting me. It's always it always feels like coming home to come back to UC Berkeley, but specifically coming back to ISSI is really like coming home for me because I was a graduate fellow at the Institute when I was finishing my PhD here, and being a part of this community is, I mean, I'm not exaggerating at all when I say that I got my degree in no small part because of the support and mentorship that I received by people in this organization. So it really is truly a homecoming for me. It's also really an honor for me to be here celebrating the really incredible work of our honorees today. Because these awards recognize young social change activists and people working to better the lives of children and young people, I decided to tailor my comments sort of really in line with that audience. I'm guessing that most of us here are connected in some way to education, to youth, to families. Yeah? More or less? Somewhat? I invited my mom and dad. They're like, okay, sure, they're like nodding, you know? More or less. So what I want to do then today is to talk about an issue that I think is really one of the most important social issues of our time. And connect this to the work that we're doing in the field of education, and connect this to the work that we're doing with young people and their families. So I've titled my comments, Sanctuary and Educational Justice, Why Dismantling the Deportation Regime Must Be a Priority for All Advocates of Youth, Children, and Families. I've been working on immigration issues for about the past almost 25 years, actually, since I was a teenager, as an activist, as an advocate, as an educator, and as a researcher. For the past 15 years or so, I've been working specifically on issues related to undocumented young people and access to higher education. We often talk about the entry points into the work that we do, and I was definitely shaped by growing up on the border. That was fundamental to the path that I took in terms of my activism, in terms of my scholarship, in terms of my advocacy. I also am shaped in ongoing ways by the context that we live in, the moment that we're living in. And you know, Gloria Anzaldúa talks about the U.S.-Mexico border as, she says, es una herida abierta where the third world grates against the first and bleeds. It's an open wound where the third world grates against the first and bleeds. And growing up on that open wound and continually re-engaging with it, particularly in a moment in which it doesn't even seem right anymore to say, you know, in which immigrants are being criminalized or vilified, because that feels like such a mild way to say what's happening. But it's profoundly shaped me in ways that I think are particularly easy to understand it in moments like the one that we're currently living in. In California, I'm sure I'm not the only one who, in this past period of time, has been grateful that I live here. At the same time, I think it's easy for us in this state to feel like we're doing sanctuary right? In California, we have sanctuary schools and sanctuary churches, we have sanctuary cities and sanctuary university campuses. What declaring sanctuary means in a really concrete term, of course, is different based on these different varied contexts. But if there's one thing that we know, it's that the need for sanctuary in these times is clear. Kids in cages. separated families, workplace raids, "11-year-olds deported without their family members, children dying in ICE custody." Many of the calls for a sanctuary have to do with spaces that are inhabited by children and their families, right? Schools and churches and university campuses, communities. And I understand that what's happening in California is often seen as a model for other places. This is particularly true when we think about the question of undocumented students and access to higher education, right? We hear all the time, at least I hear all the time, that California is sort of the national model for what should be happening. I don't want to deny that what's happening is important. It was what has been won because of the activism of undocumented young people and their families. But at the same time, while I think it's important to hold up these examples and to celebrate, right, what we're doing in the state, what is going right, I also want for us to think about some of the bigger and broader questions around the connection between sanctuary and education. In particular, I want to invite us to collectively think about, first, what does sanctuary mean for us as educators, for people in education? And secondly, what's our obligation to declaring and enacting sanctuary as a field and as a discipline? What I'd like to do is to encourage us to grapple with this intersection of sanctuary and educational justice, to think in a real way about what that intersection means and looks like and has to look like. I want to make the case for understanding deportation as an educational policy issue. I want to argue that dismantling the deportation regime must be a priority for all advocates of youth, of children, of families, and it must be a priority for all of us who are connected in any way to the field of education. There's a big conference in our field that's called AERA, the American Educational Research Association. And last year in 2018, I went, and I did a search in the conference program for the word deportation to see how many papers and panels were being given with that word in the title. 0 is the answer. This was spring of 2018. This is the height of the Trump presidency. And at the biggest, most comprehensive conference in the field of education, we were talking about deportation. I didn't go to the 2019 conference, in part because I was still salty about the 2018 conference. But I did a search the program, and there was one paper with the word deportation in the title. I do think that we in the field think about deportation, right? How can we not? But at the same time, I don't think that we as a field have made a definitive decision that we are going to grapple with deportation as a phenomenon that is inextricably connected to the field of education, right? That deportation is absolutely centrally configured when we think about what education means in this time and the work that we do related to education. So what I'd like to do with my remaining time is to briefly share 3 stories that I think really help draw the connection between education and deportation. I share these stories in hopes that they can help us collectively think about what it means for us to engage in this fight as a field, how we're uniquely positioned to do so, and what it means to understand deportation as an educational justice issue. Story number 1. I'm sorry for the grainy picture. Pictures are not actually allowed in the courtroom, and so this was a leaked picture. And it's the only one like it that exists. Story number 1. Almost a year and a half ago, I sat in a Tucson courtroom witnessing Operation Streamline proceedings. Operation Streamline, for those of you who don't know, is a program of the Department of Homeland Security which expedites removal of detained migrants by prosecuting 70 people in an afternoon. 7 to 12 people at a time come to the courtroom. The details differ by jurisdiction, but in Tucson, someone can be detained in the Sonoran Desert on Tuesday afternoon, be seen in the courtroom on Wednesday morning after having consulted for maybe 10 minutes with their appointed attorney, and be deported and dropped off back of the streets of Mexico by Wednesday evening. That's how quickly the process works. The court proceedings are complicated, they move very quickly. I have spent now probably more than 30 hours in court witnessing these proceedings. I have a PhD, they were very difficult for me to follow along with, to give some context. But back to my story. The day after I observed streamlined proceedings for the first time, I sat in a makeshift migrant shelter for women a few feet into the Mexican side of the border in Nogales, Sonora. Nogales is both sides of the border, right? There's Nogales, Arizona, and there's Nogales, Sonora, which is in Mexico. The shelter is a small apartment. It's run by a small group of nuns who provide a bed for migrant women on the border, some of whom stay for days and some of whom stay for much longer. I sat and I spoke with these women, all of whom had been through the streamlined proceeding similar to the one that I had seen the day before. Many had served jail time because they were repeat offenders. All of them had made this dangerous journey, some more than once, for the simple fact because their children lived on the other side of the border. They wept as they spoke about their children. They yearned to partake in the mundane daily acts of motherhood, frustrated by the impossible to breach border just 100 yards away from where they were sitting that kept them from their children. Story number 2. About 5 years ago, I was interviewing a young woman who attended a community college in the Central Valley of California. She was a star student in high school, but she decided on community college because as a undocumented young person, she has no access to federal financial aid, and so community college was the best financial choice for her to make. She was thrilled about enrolling in community college. She was plugging ahead, smart, driven, excited about her future when her father was deported. She had no choice but to increase her hours at the fast food restaurant that she worked at because she needed to increase her wages in order to help her family stay afloat. School predictably took a backseat. She struggled, feeling defeated, watching her goals of transferring slip further and further away. Today, she's not much closer to her goal of transferring, her education derailed by the deportation of her father. Story number 3. In 2013, a Mexican teenager named Cruz Velázquez Acevedo died in the custody of U.S. Customs and Border Enforcement. This happened just a few miles from where I grew up. The 16-year-old had just crossed into the U.S.-Mexico border point of entry, the San Isidro point of entry. He was carrying 2 bottles of a liquid that he claimed was apple juice. It was liquid meth. It was assumed that he was approached by drug smugglers who particularly prey on young people with no records to do this kind of work. The going rate is about $150. And he was paid, it's assumed, to bring these bottles of liquid meth into the U.S. The officers who were immediately suspicious because it looked nothing like apple juice, and they know what liquid meth looks like, broke protocol. And instead of sending the liquid off to be tested in an on-site facility that is specifically designed for this exact situation, instead they're seen on video, laughing with each other as they tell him to take a drink from the bottle to prove that he isn't lying. The officers are sitting, at a desk like this, and the cameras shoot from behind them. So everything is seen. And when they turn to each other to laugh, you can see it very, very clearly. There's no audio on the video. The teen took a sip. They look at each other, they laugh, they motion, take another. There are 4 sips in all. Within minutes, Cruz is convulsing and crying out in agony, saying, mi corazón, because his pulse has reached an alarming rate of 220 beats per minute, more than twice the normal rate for adults. He died a short time later. I share these three stories because this is the context that has been created by the deportation regime. These are the young people and their families who are caught in its crosshairs. None of these stories take place in a classroom, none of them take place on a schoolyard, none of them take place in the spaces that we often think about as related to education, but all of them are inextricably connected to education. The children with deported parents are the kids in the classrooms across this country. Deported mothers have children living here, children they are trying to get back to. The violence at the border, unapologetically directed at children, is born of this context and normalized through this regime. Sometimes when we talk about sanctuary, we think about it as a designation, as something that a place either has or doesn't have, right? Something that is either declared or is not at a particular institution. I want to encourage us to think about sanctuary as an invitation to what we could be. The deportation regime is impacting the health of our families, the right to survive, and threatens the right to education that all children are entitled to. As educators, this should be simply unacceptable. In a similar way to how medical professionals came out a few years ago to name gun violence as a public health issue, I want us to think about what it would mean and what might be possible if we as educators, as people connected to education, name deportation as an educational equity issue. I want to encourage us to think about what it would look like if we did. What would be possible if teachers were to be activated around this question and use their moral authority as teachers to refuse to comply with ICE, to insist that they will not act as ICE agents, and to also insist that there's a moral imperative for us to fight deportations as a force that detrimentally impacts children in classrooms across this country. What would it mean and what would it look like for teachers' unions to take a strong stand on immigration reform, positioning the health and wellness of families and children as negatively impacted by deportation policy? What would it mean for schools to see deportation as a community issue, not a private issue that some families struggle with and through on their own, but as a community issue, and build and support systems to step in when a family in the community has been destabilized through deportation? What would be possible if college presidents refused to comply with ICE, citing the protection of their students as fundamental to their educational mission and seeing the operation of the Department of Homeland Security as fundamental impinging on their ability to carry out that mission? And what would it mean for youth activists and youth workers to stand on a platform of educational rights and educational justice, making it clear that the deportation and immigration policy that so many of them are impacted by is directly impeding their ability to learn and be educated? The stakes could not be higher. I think about those women in the shelter who speak about their devotion to their children as the reason that they migrated in the first place. I think about Belen, who will never likely transfer to a four-year college despite her promise because her family's survival is understandably a more pressing concern. I think about Cruz Velázquez Acevedo, a child who received an immediate death sentence for his mistake, a reality made possible because of the criminalization of brown boys on the border and the impunity enjoyed by those who are paid to secure it. The utility of sanctuary is not just what it shields us from, but what it pushes us to be and what it pushes us to act on in this political moment. This is what sanctuary does for us. It gives us, as insiders to the field of education, as people connected to the field of education, an entry point into thinking about what our obligation and responsibility is in this moment of mass detention and mass deportation. It enables us to think in an expansive and an imaginative way, as many of the honorees here do on a daily basis, not only about how we fight this regime, but how we bring about an alternative future. Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. The first prize that will be awarded today is the Foundations for Change Thomas I. Yamashita Prize. The prize was established in 2007 and is named in honor of Thomas I. Yamashita, who was an undergraduate here at UC Berkeley, where he studied civil engineering. Mr. Yamashita was a member of the class of 1942. However, due to the internment of Americans of Japanese descent in 1942 on the west coast of the United States, that made it impossible for him to graduate from UC Berkeley. He eventually received his degree from the University of Nebraska, and even so, he always identified as a Cal Bear. He was a lifelong member of the Alumni Association and felt a deep connection to this place. Thomas Yamashita spent most of his civil engineering career in Hong Kong, now known for its beautiful skyline of steel and glass towers. His work was mostly unseen, however. It focused on the foundations of those buildings and solving the complex engineering problems that made it possible for them to be built. So it's in this spirit that the Yamashita Prize was established, to recognize those who are on the ground, engaged in hard work, the foundational work of social change, transforming the social landscape, often in unseen and previously unappreciated ways, and serving as a bridge between the academy and communities, strengthening the ties and knowledge sharing in both directions. Now I'd like to invite David Schraub to come forward. David is a lecturer at Berkeley Law and also a PhD candidate here in political science, and he nominated this year's prize winner, Joel Sati.
Thank you, Christine. It's my distinct privilege to introduce Joel Sati, this year's winner of the Yamashita Prize. The Yamashita Prize is given to extraordinary individuals such as Joel and such as Rosa. Yet having known Joel for some time, I think the label of extraordinary might be one that causes him to bristle a little bit. We know that much of the advocacy around immigrant rights in this country is often dedicated or centered around extraordinary individuals, people with unblemished records, valedictorians, perfect GPAs. And so much of Joel's work, despite the fact that in many ways he could be a poster child for just that sort of immigrant, is based around the idea that these rights are not ones that should be reserved to extraordinary individuals. Things such as having a secure livelihood, feeling safe in one's home and in one's person, getting a living wage, right? The feeling of sanctuary. These are not the preserves of extraordinary people. These are decidedly for ordinary people, people with ordinary grade point averages, with ordinary career aspirations, with ordinary perhaps brushes with the law. They're very much ordinary in character, and in that sense, I think is something that is central to Joel's work as an academic and as an activist. And yet if you'll indulge us just for today, Joel, I think just for today, we might take note of you as an extraordinary individual. The work that you do and have done throughout your entire career, your life trajectory from growing up very near to where I grew up in Maryland, going to Montgomery College and then the City University of New York and the Skadden Honors Program for legal studies, overcoming bouts of homelessness and food insecurity, coming here to Berkeley to pursue your PhD in jurisprudence and social policy and soon a JD at Yale Law School, having founded several initiatives or worked closely in initiatives for undocumented immigrants, including Undocumental most recently, as well as working at the Haas Institute for Social Equality. Those are some activisty side things. Your work on the more academic side is every bit as impressive, right? A well-respected author whose work on illegalization has gained traction not just in academic fields, but also among social activists, right? Having co-founded the Social Epistemology Reading Group here at UC Berkeley, the things you have done and will continue to do are nothing less than extraordinary. I have no doubt about that. But I also have no doubt that the extraordinary things you do will allow so many more people to achieve very ordinary things, ordinary security, ordinary livelihoods, ordinary happiness, and ordinary sanctuary. So I think without any further delay on my part, it is my distinct honor and distinct pleasure to present to you my colleague, my classmate, my collaborator, my co-author, most importantly, my very dear friend, Joel Sati.
Please join me as I spend the next 5 minutes trying to figure out how to follow that up. So first and foremost, thank you to the Institute for the Study of Societal Issues and the Thomas I. Yamashita Prize for recognizing me with this wonderful honor. Special thanks to David for not only the introduction but the nomination, and also for your friendship and also for your guidance as well. My mother and my sister, both of them could not be here. I would also like to thank them. They have been people who have given me advice and have guided me along the right path despite my worst efforts to go away from that. I would like to thank my partner Bianca, who's here. She's been someone who I confide in every way. I love you, and this is in large part your award. I would also like to thank the Jurisprudence and Social Policy program, and I would also like to thank Chris Coots, who's my supervisor, and also Sarah Song, who I don't think she's here, but they've been really wonderful advisors. They have given me such good guidance, and they've given me such affirmation and confidence that I could do the work that I am doing. I would also want to thank the staff of Undocumental, Esme Jiménez, AY Odeyemi, and Rafa Martinez, who they are all doing their own awesome things, and that project could not have gotten off the ground if it weren't for them. I'd also like to thank Genevieve, who's been a wonderful mentor and such a badass. I don't know, I feel like if there's someone who, when I grow up, I want to be you. It's one of those things where, looking back on, so I'm at a very critical point in my life. If you ask me what I'm doing, I'll probably tell you something about my perspectives, which I'm defending in about 5 days. But that seems to be like a pretty high level problem to have. It's stressful, it's very demanding, and it's all of that, but when it comes to the basics, I got it all pretty much figured out, and that's a luxury that I haven't had until recently. One of the conclusions that I've drawn about my life is that it's been a very contingent life. So many things could have gone the other way, and I wouldn't be here if any one of those things had gone wrong. So, for example, in the fall of 2012 was my second semester of community college, and I was short $700 for that semester's tuition, and I remember talking to my friend Yves, and I told him that, I kind of need it, it's due today. If I don't, I'm probably not going to be able to go to school for the semester, and without saying anything, I didn't even ask him, he just offered to do it, to cover the shortfall, and I was like, okay, I'll definitely pay you back. He's like, no, don't worry about it, pay it forward. I remember, being $300 short on rent in February of 2014, and being homeless in the middle of winter, and, all of that happening, and, there's also been, I definitely don't take my position for granted, or at least I try not to. And one of the things that always motivates me is just an understanding of just how fragile life can be, and because before I was, David's introduction, before all of that, I was a suicidal young kid at the age of 18, having graduated high school and not being able to go to college. I had accepted an offer at a 4-year, and I couldn't accept it because I didn't have the money. And at the time, I came across the story of this young man. His name is Joaquin Luna. He also was an 18-year-old in 2011, around the time that I was, and he found that he didn't have opportunity to advance either through work or through education, and he took his own life. And I always think about how I was at that time, and I don't know how my work will develop, but I definitely want to make a world that is better, that is easier for someone in that position, because I was there not too long ago. So thank you.
Now I'd like to invite forward Dr. Colette Kahn. She is an associate professor in the International and Multicultural Education Department at the University of San Francisco, and she was a co-nominator of this year's Yamashita Prize. Honorable mention, Dr. Rosa Maria Jiménez.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to follow up on Genevieve's comment. It's great to be home. I also graduated from UC Berkeley Education, and I was also a fellow at ISSI under Pedro and Gabriel. I tell you, sometimes things come right on time. You don't know where that next paycheck is going to come from to pay your rent, and someone's like, come in and join our family. And it was all the support that I needed. I'm so thrilled to be back. So thank you so much. I'm also honored to be able to congratulate my colleague, Dr. Rosa Jiménez, who is a new colleague to me. I'm new to USF, and so I've known her for a year. And she was one of the first people I met when I came to USF, and she welcomed me with open arms, and it was a time I knew was going to be a new home for me. I want to congratulate you on behalf of our department chair, Manisha Josh, who's teaching tonight, who co-nominated Dr. Jiménez with me, but then also a host of folks from our USF family also signed on to the letter because we believe that you are amazing and brilliant and beautiful inside and out. So Dr. Jiménez grew up in the Central Valley, the daughter of Mexican immigrants who worked very hard to support her. She graduated from UC Davis and went on to teach in social studies. Later went to UCLA, got her graduate degree in education. She has, I think for me, is a model of what we spent a great deal of time yesterday talking about what it means to be a public scholar who works right on the edge of the academy and the community, right? And is an activist in everything that she does and the projects that she chooses to take on. Working with teachers to develop curricula that allow youth to bring in their migration stories, right? Center their curriculum around the lives of youth, right? Not the curriculum that the state would have us put forward for youth. Working with principals who call her in to ask, how can we support students best? That's not necessarily work that gets recognized by the academy, and I know she's going up for tenure soon, and I certainly hope that our institution has the wherewithal to know. I could go on and on. That was like a little note to self. Has the wherewithal to recognize the work that she does. She has also partnered with teachers to develop an ethnic studies curriculum that youth then took and created an after-school program, allowed them to be activists on their own behalf. Her work, and I want to mention this one last thing, even over time, but we were CC'd on an email from a student who's graduating with her master's this semester, and of her own accord, as a new mother who's about to graduate, she took the time to write this many-page email in single space that sang the praises of Dr. Jiménez for supporting her when she didn't think she could make it through. She wasn't sure what she was going to do when she realized that she was pregnant, but yet had just started this program and she wanted it all, right? And I think people deserve to have it all if that's what they want. And she gave credit to Dr. Jiménez for saying that she was able to finish this program, right? That she was able to have everything that she wanted to have to celebrate it's her son's first birthday this month, and then also she's graduating this month. And this is in large part due to Dr. Jiménez. So this is to say that her activism is both within the academy supporting students, and I feel supported by her as well, but also beyond the academy. So please join me in congratulating her.
Hello everyone. Hi. Gosh, this is a real honor for me. If I tear up, I'm just gonna keep on talking. So my name is Rosa Jiménez, as folks have mentioned. I am here, a proud daughter of working class immigrant parents from Central Valley. And my parents actually cannot be here with me. My father actually has dementia now. He's in the hospital in Modesto. My sister, my brother are taking care of him. And my mother passed a few years ago. And so a lot of what I do and share has been inspired by their legacy to me. And so I'm gonna share a little bit. I put their picture up because they're always with me. And I also put a picture up of some of the work that I've done, talking and giving back and sharing with students at schools. There's a poster board right behind me that actually has a little picture when I was in kinder and my doctorate picture. You can't quite see that, it's there. So I take this little poster board with me whenever I give talks at schools and help students sort of see the trajectory that might be possible. So thank you also. I started off and I wanted to just say thank you to the Institute for the Study of Societal Issues. Thank you to Yamashita and his legacy. I'm incredibly honored to have been given this award, this honorable mention award, and I'm honored to have my colleague Genevieve share this inspirational keynote. And Sati, thank you for the work that you're doing. So I also wanted to just briefly mention my colleagues at USF, my IME colleagues, which Colette had mentioned, Monisha Bajaj, Emma Fuentes, Susan Katz, and Christine Ye, and a host of other folks that I just stand alongside and work alongside in this important work. I want to share this piece here where I said my research was inspired by my life story. My truth-telling of how I learned from the sacrifices my parents made, from the racism and xenophobia we experienced, and from knowledge, strength, and wisdom, and the consejos that they shared with me as Mexicano immigrants pursuing a dream of a better life for their children in the Central Valley, California. And consejos are like short pieces of wisdom that are usually shared in oral histories or through oral stories. This is a little bit about my own background. I mentioned I'm from Central Valley originally. I'm a bilingual, bicultural child of working class Mexican immigrants, and I was also labeled an English learner in school. This label that narrowly defines children and often pegs them in very narrow types of instructional programs, even though, and that fails to see that they're actually emerging bilinguals, right? I learned from my family's oral histories, our deep childhood experiences, and I also bring my work as a social studies teacher of Latino bilingual bicultural youth to my research that I do. These are a couple pictures. My parents worked in the fields. My parents worked in factories. That's me in kinder. That kinder look of being terrified. But all of the pictures of my siblings and I have that like serious look, and then later I start to smile. But this is a brief shot here of some of the work that I do in schools and classrooms with teachers. I talk about community cultural wealth and other types of aspirational strengths. And here we see families, social navigate aspirations, racial injustice, and language. This is a theory from Tara Yoso, and one that's used in higher ed, but that I've extended to think about with teachers as how do we help youth understand our own cultural strengths in ways that make sense to them, in ways that make sense to teachers, in ways that teachers can use to leverage and unleash the kinds of light that is already within us. I also share my own autoethnographies with youth. This is an example of my father's side of the stories. This is him with his burra, or his mula, I think. He corrects me because he says there's a difference there. His mula Petra, and he used to walk several miles with his mule to plant corn and harvest corn in the cerros of Mexico. And as an adult, he still loves corn. Corn is very sacred to our livelihood and our well-being, and even when I take him to Sprouts on the right-hand side, he runs to the corn bucket and brings home dozens of corn There's only like 3 of us, but we bring a lot of corn home. So my dad shares these pláticas. Tú estudias como una identificación, como una mica, la muestras y puedes cruzar fronteras. And I'll let you read it in English for those of you. So this is one of the quotes my dad shared with me. I've shared it with youth and to help them unleash their own consejos, their own family stories, the ways that our families teach us in their intuitive and cultural knowledge, and we help students to see those knowledges, we help teachers to see those in students, and unleash and unearth those in classroom practices. I won't read this here, but maybe just the last part. It's from a student as we did this project, and the last part here where he talks about his father helping them understand what life is like picking cherries in the fields in the Central Valley, but that this idea of community cultural wealth helps him understand not to be ashamed of who we are, but that we should be proud. So these are just a few more pictures of some of the work that I've done work with teachers to develop syllabi curriculum. With a teacher last year here, a local teacher in the Bay Area, we developed a syllabi that was accepted by the state as an A through G English course, but it was designed through Chicano literature. So it was a very unique way that we were able to elevate that. And then just a few other pictures of some of the work that I've done and continue to do. I'm a teacher at heart and a researcher, but I've learned to bring use all of the strengths and the everyday practices of my teaching and experiences into the research that I do as community engaged and activist research, and hopefully I will continue to do that and to honor my family and our communities in ways that will help us live through different possibilities than we're living today. So I want to thank you very much.
So about the prize, the Kids First David L. Kirp Prize rewards UC Berkeley undergraduate students engaged in new or ongoing work that demonstrates a commitment, whether in education or other domains, to creating a better future for children and youth. The prize recognizes students who have developed innovative strategies to increase opportunities for children and youth, as well as students who have demonstrated commitment to improving the future of children and youth. The language is a little bit vague there, but what was really important to Professor Kirp in establishing the prize is that there is really 2 kind of avenues towards getting it. One is someone who's found, who's created something from scratch that wasn't there before, and that's kind of the innovative part. But then the other is the person who recognizes that we don't necessarily need another organization. Maybe there's something already going on that they want to put their time and spirit and heart into, and so we wanted to be able to recognize both those paths. And actually this year, just kind of by chance, it happened that we do have both those paths among our awardees. And also the intent of the prize is to shine a light on a student whose work has gone largely unrecognized. And just a little bit about David. Fortunately, he's still with us, although not here today. He's now a professor of the graduate school here at Cal, which means that he's retired from teaching. But before that, he was a faculty member at the Goldman School of Public Policy here. And while he's retired from teaching, he's still very busy. He's a policy consultant and a contributing writer to the New York Times and other public kind of scholarship, as well as an academic. In his 17 books and scores of articles in both the popular press and scholarly journals, he has tackled some of America's biggest social problems, including affordable housing, access to health, gender discrimination, and HIV/AIDS. Throughout his career, his main focus has been on education and children's policy, from cradle to college and career. Because of his deep commitment to children and youth and his belief in the power of Cal undergrads, so this award is only open to UC Berkeley undergrads, to do great things, he decided to endow this prize, and we're very appreciative of that. To present the first prize to Gabriel Santamaria. Come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm humbled.
Good afternoon.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about my path, my background. My name is Gabriel Santamaria. Gabe, ever since I got to Berkeley, it makes it a little easier for folks. But I am the product of public school education. I'm the product of a long, arduous journey from Nicaragua to San Francisco. I consider myself an immigrant. Over the last few years, that term has changed to refugee. I didn't realize that I was a refugee, but looking at it, that's what I was. My high school career was surrounded by violence. By the time I graduated high school, I had at least 20 friends that were murdered. Individuals that I ate dinner with, would go to the store with, have classes with. This was normal. My experience in the United States was one where I needed to figure out my way. My parents said, we got you here, you need to figure it out on your own. And to me, that was a privilege. Throughout my high school time, I did play some sports, and that got me through high school. I graduated with less than a 1.0 GPA. So that's my background, right? That's what I was able to finish high school with the opportunities which I had, which were pretty much nothing, right? A few years later, I decided to go to community college, at which time I was given more opportunities on how to study, opportunities about how to better prepare myself for school. In doing so, I realized that other individuals could do just as well. I started making the dean's list, I started doing rather well academically, so in that spirit, I thought to myself, there must be other individuals that can do just as well from my background. And with that is how I started the organization Youth Creating Change. Started working with kids, started really just letting them run the show. In that time, I was also doing nonprofit work, volunteering at my local nonprofits, and they had me go speak at a violence prevention panel. They said, hey, you're going to go speak, we need you to talk for a little bit, talk about what you want to do, and this was probably the first time I was ever going to do some public speaking, and at that time, all I knew was that I wanted to become a physician. That was it. I didn't know that you had to take certain classes, I just knew that I wanted to become a physician. So I said, I wonder where there's a medical school. Going up to San Francisco, I didn't realize UCSF was a medical school. I said, okay, well, I think I want to go to USF, because they have a biotechnology program. And that's right there, that's cool. And UCSF has a program that works with communities like mine. That looks really cool. So I prepared a 5-minute spiel, 10-minute spiel, got up there and started talking and said, I want to become a physician, I want to go to USF and then go to UCSF and work in a prime program. And little did I know, the entire front row was the incoming UCSF prime class. So opportunity knocked on my door. One of the medical students said, hey, we should work together. And from then on out, we made this more of an established partnership where the medical students were working with the kids. Opportunity, right? So somebody gave me the opportunity to learn how to learn on the dean's list. Somebody gave me the opportunity to connect my community with medical students, and that allowed some of these students to do some of the great projects that you see up there. Some of those students were not expected to graduate high school, and some of them were at UC Merced, UC Santa Cruz, UC Santa Barbara. Counselor spoke to me afterwards and said, why did you even work with this kid? I couldn't believe this kid was going to make it, but these kids did make it. Right? So I think opportunity really holds weight. I think looking at individuals through the lens of strength rather than deficiency is really a powerful thing to do. In 2 weeks, I'll be walking the stage, graduating from UC Berkeley with honors. And these are the type of things that can be done when you look at somebody through the lens of what can be, rather than all their hardships. Right? So, thank you.
I just wanted to mention that the organization that he started, San Francisco Youth Coalition, he currently serves as director of that. Well, it was also a community of peers and very much of a collaborative organization. And with the support of the community and academic institutional partners, the organization addresses issues such as violence prevention, leadership development, cultural affirmation, and civic engagement, while increasing access to higher education. So you can see a lot of continuities and interesting threads, redefining what violence prevention means, redefining what sanctuary means, redefining what cultural affirmation means. And now I'd like to switch. Give me a second for a little technical. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention is that Dave still has the dream of becoming a doctor, and we had to schedule this around his MCAT preparation, so. And now I'd like to welcome up our second place winner, Alejandra León Herrera.
Good afternoon, my name is Alejandra León Herrera, and I am an undergrad student here at UC Berkeley. I want to start off by thanking everyone for being here today, especially my family, friends, roommates, mentors, professors, and David Kirp for endowing this prize to us. I'm honored to have been selected as an awardee. I would like to share a little more about the organization Mi Futuro Está en Tus Manos, which is the reason why I'm here today. It was an organization founded by my lovely mother, who is here with us today. Takes part in our small town in Mexico, at Atemajac de Brizuela. And I'm just going to give a little background on how it started. One afternoon in 2010, as my mother and I were at the local plaza of our town in Mexico, we saw a boy of around 7 years old break down and have a seizure. My mother and I ran to help him and his crying, desperate mother. His name was Brandon. As of 4 years ago, he became an angel and has left us. We came to find out he was having around 2 to 3 seizures a day because of lack of proper medication. Like many families in that town, his family was not able to afford that. My mother and I later spoke to Brandon's mother about his condition, who did not fully understand the severity and danger of Brandon's mental illness because she did not have the resources to take him to a specialist. She had asked the local government for help, but her request had been ignored. Through Brandon's mom, we later found out that there were numerous kids and few adults in our town who were living with a disability, that their parents did not have the resources to support, many of them living in the shadows. To take action, my mother and I went from door to door for about a month in our local town, asking if anyone knew of any other children who were suffering from disabilities, either mental or physical. At the end of the day, we gathered over 60 kids. Most of these kids living in extreme poverty, who barely had enough to survive on their own. At this moment, my mother and I decided to gather all the families that we had found to decide where we should go from there. Forming an organization that would allow these families to receive mental and economic support from all of us, and mental support from each other, seemed like the perfect thing to do. It was the funding that we were a little more worried about. Some of these kids needed very pricey medications, and the cost exceeded what my family could provide. We came to the solution that help from our friends and family members in the United States could make a difference. We have a community of people who are from our hometown that live all over the United States, so reaching out to them would not be too difficult. We knew that if we reached out to them and explained the circumstances, we could get some support. We began to do fundraisers where my family and I, along with friends, would either sell Mexican food at parties here in Bay Area that we would host, conduct raffles, auction items, or any other fundraising methods that we could think of. Another strategy that has been very helpful was assigning community members to specific kids under the name of godparents that send money to their godchild to support them for their monthly medications, treatments, physical therapy, etc. All the money that is sent to Mexico is received by my mom's sister, who is in charge of receiving the money and delivering the money amongst the children based on their need. Apart from all the hard work and efforts towards this community of kids that we have been with, there's a huge emotional attachment behind this involvement. We have lost warriors, kids that were 3 years old, others that were 10, and this past summer, a 19-year-old who passed away from cancer and also had a leg removed because he had an infection developed. Sometimes these tragedies were the result of not receiving medical attention sooner. And knowing this devastates me to think that if we could have done something sooner, maybe we could have prevented this. When cases like this happen, my mother does not hesitate to help with all the expenses. We all come together and show support for one another. Though our organization is not considered official under the eyes of the law because the local government refuses to economically support us, we are extremely united, active, and a passionate organization. I know it's a long reach, but I hope to someday be the amazing woman and leader that my mother has been from the moment she took the decision that has changed the lives and well-beings of so many. I hope to someday take full responsibility of the center, Mi Futuro Está en Tus Manos, and develop similar works in other areas where I know it is needed. I would like to advise everyone in this room to know that someone's future is in your hands. Congratulations to the other awardees for the amazing work they are doing. It is people like you that give our world hope. Thank you. There was other images like this.
Yeah, show some of the pictures.
Yeah, so these are just some of like the events that we put together. That's one of the fundraising events. That one took place in Cisco, Mexico. It's my mom, and one time that we had a reunion in Mexico. Those are some of the kids that are part of the center. And so there's like a booklet where we have all the kids, their age, their disability, approximate medical costs, and when we are looking for people to donate or for their godparent to pair them up, we usually show them this, and based on their economic standing, they usually like pair up with a child. These are some more of the children, and that's a Christmas event.
And I just want to add that Alejandra is a junior now, so she still has even more time here, and we're expecting more great things from her. And she's majoring in poli-sci with a focus on international relations. And she also just wrapped up an 11-month internship with Governor Gavin Newsom. So I think that hopefully she's going to continue to make an impact in public service here and in Mexico. So and we have one more awardee. Unfortunately, Nolan couldn't be here today, but I'm pleased to tell you a little bit about him. And I think hopefully all of our awardees are going to, definitely the Kirp Prize ones, I hope they'll all get together and have a little planning session because they could do some great work together. Nolan Pokpongkiat is a third-year computer science major here at Cal, working as an emergency medical technician in the summer of 2017. He noticed a lack of diversity in the healthcare workforce. After raising $18,000 from Kaiser Permanente, Gilead Sciences, and the Big Ideas Social Entrepreneurship Competition, Nolan co-founded Felix, a nonprofit organization with the goal of diversifying the healthcare field by empowering young people to pursue futures in medicine. As managing director, Nolan brought together a team to design a month-long summer program where high school students spend a week living at UC Berkeley, training in basic clinical skills, getting CPR certified, and learning about possible healthcare careers. Then, through partnerships with local hospitals and other medical professionals, students rotate through shadowing placements in the hospital, on the ambulance, and in community clinics for the remainder of the month. So, in absentia, let's give Nolan a round of applause. We have just a few more minutes before our reception, which will give us more time for informal conversation, but we have just a few more minutes before that. I'd like to invite up Genevieve and our 4 awardees to come up here and question. Yes.
This could be for anyone in the panel. How do you keep from getting demotivated and discouraged by the climate?
I don't know. So it's like one of those things where it's. So on the one hand, yeah, it definitely has been motivating because it seems like at least the work doesn't seem like there's going to be like that much of an effect, at least in the short term. But I think for me, at the end of the day, it's, well, it was situations like this that sort of motivated the work in the first place. So I think it's just a matter of maintaining perspective and also just trying to take things like one day at a time. And it's cliche because it works, because I feel like, you know, trying to take in the totality of everything, it kind of gets questioned.
I think that for me, there's not really any room for getting unmotivated because there's people who like literally depend on the work we're doing. So I think that that's not really up to a question for us.
On my end, community-based participatory research, the term that I learned at Cal was something that I was doing with the students before I got here. Their perspective is valid. Their perspective is often ahead of the time of what I would read in research articles because they are on the front line of what's going on. So when I go into the community and I see what's going on, and they tell me what they're experiencing and how they'd like to address it, and then I come back to academia and I hear individuals who try to come up with solutions that sometimes are on the same page as what the community is saying, but other times are so far apart that it demands that these individuals get in positions to publish, to present that research, and do that work. Because without that degree, without those peer-reviewed articles, their voices just go in the wind.
I would say that I think the climate is definitely demoralizing, and that I often get overwhelmed with what is happening in our world. And so what I turn to in a personal way is just trying to keep centered on things that are present, things that I am connected to, whether that's family, whether that's a higher spiritual power, whether that's the communities that you're working with, the voices and stories and hearts of young people that you're working with. So I think those kinds of things are what keep me going.
Any other questions? Bianca, and then maybe we'll just take a few questions and then answers. So Bianca, and then Robin, and then in the back, yeah.
This is sort of a reflection of that question, but what's the nicest thing that's happened while you guys have been doing the community work, or something that like really touched you, that helped motivate you maybe?
Let me just, let's hear some more, yeah.
So on the deportation examples, Genevieve, that you were talking about, I'm wondering whether you could bring that home a little bit to our Bay Area schools and just how much of this, or the both of you, is this a real ever-present problem of insecurity and anxiety and stress among our students, and how that's impacting their performance in the whole, a little bit more about that.
And last question in the back.
Yes, I'm sorry, wasn't able to keep everyone's name straight, but the fellow on the end here.
Okay.
First of all, how do you get 20 friends? People are lucky to have that many friends. And second, these are all related, just 3 questions. Secondly, how did you keep from getting bitter or a sense of hopelessness? I think you said you had 20 friends who were killed, something like that. And then thirdly, you can keep this as brief as you'd like to, because I realize it's a big question. But what sort of strategies do you use in your violence prevention work?
So, in regards to those 20 friends, I grew up in San Francisco's Mission District. It wasn't a gentrified location at that time. So there was a lot of violence and individuals would get killed. So that's how a lot of them died. And since then, more have died.
Yeah, but my question was, how do you keep from getting bitter or a sense of hopelessness about seeing so many friends die?
Well, I was born in a third world country. So as far as I knew it, this was opportunity. So death is worldwide. Like there was a civil war in my country. So I didn't think that death was negotiable. I thought that was part of life. So I never looked at it in that way. You have to survive, you have to succeed. Have an opportunity in the United States, make something of it.
And my last question, I realize this could be a big question, but what sort of strategies do you use in your violence prevention? You can keep that as brief as you care. I know it's a big question.
Well, it could be a large question, right? But really it just goes to the point of empowering individuals to say what they want to say and let them present. So the actual approach that I used to work with youth is allowing them to present and do research and say what's wrong with their community, and whatever they feel will address those societal ills, right? So it could be food and culture, right? Or it could be education, or it could be music, or it could be art. Something that keeps the mind going with hope and demonstrates strengths within the community, rather than saying, oh, these are the things that that are wrong, and this is what you don't have, provide a path to move forward and put the blinders on, in my opinion. And it's worked rather well.
Thank you.
Sure. So briefly, yes. The answer to your question is yes. That the fear is different in a place like the Bay Area than it is in a place like Alabama, but it's absolutely happening here, and people know it and people feel that. And so the sense of insecurity and fear, I would say, since the inauguration, of course, this all was happening before that. And so it stretches far before that, but the sort of the renewed fear, both in terms of sort of the state violence and then also the vigilante violence, I think is palpable. The thing about deportation is that it is in many ways similar to sort of incarceration, right? Is that it's sometimes difficult to see it because what you're seeing is absence, of people being removed, people being taken away, people being rendered invisible, and so it means that it's easier for us to look away because we don't see it in the same way that we might see somebody, gushing blood. But it is in much of the same ways a similar kind of dynamic. Also, I should say that there is work that's being done. I think that the Oakland School District is a really great example. The Oakland School District has not only declared itself as a sanctuary district, but they also have sort of solidified particular kinds of practices and processes. So it's not sort of sanctuary in name, like we're going to say that we're sanctuary, but they've created particular processes and practices around what it means to actually live and create and be sanctuary in the school district. Everything from if a family is facing deportation of a family member, all the way to how do we talk about deportation in our schools, even with our very young children, in a way to talk about, sort of making sure that people know their rights and that people understand that this is a community issue that we need to be engaged around.
So to close, would any of you like to share an example or a story that's been hopeful or rewarding? I think was the prompt, something that's kept you.
I think I'll go first. There was one experience, so before coming to Cal, I didn't know about the process to transfer. Well, I knew how to transfer from a community college, but I didn't understand what it took to apply to a four-year college from high school. So one of the students I was working with approached me during Thanksgiving break and said, Gabe, I need help making my personal statement. If you know about applying to college, Thanksgiving break is usually when they're due. So she came to me the day that it was due, with a piece of paper. Her and another student came to me, but she in particular, I remember her being specific, based on her story, but she pulled out a crumpled up piece of paper. Every paragraph started with the word I. I asked her if her teacher helped her with it, and she said yeah. My next question was, where did he get his education? It was a prestigious school, to say the least. So in my mind, I said, okay, this teacher just didn't care. I didn't realize that you needed to have a 3.0 in order to at least apply. She had a 2.0. To me, I thought, oh, she's passing. So we sat there until maybe 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and I got the meat of who she was. Her story was not being told, right? And her story was actually one of struggle. Her story was one of her father, hustling the mother to come across the border, staying on top of the mom to get him across the border. Once he came across the border, he got her pregnant and left her stranded in the Central Valley with her and a new baby brother. These are all undocumented individuals, right? This is the story she was telling, but she didn't realize that was what was happening. She was just happy to have seen her father. She was just happy that for a year she was able to attend some good schools and read some good books, right? And we presented a story of resilience, we presented a story of grit and making the most of her opportunity, and she got into UC Santa Cruz. So I thought that was amazing. That to me is still something that stays with me.
Share a brief story about some of the youth that I've worked with who've written narratives of their family's migration story. And one of the students, Juan, wrote down that, you know, my parents always tell us stories, but I don't listen that much. I think they probably do, but I think what he was sort of getting at that was interesting was that he had to sort of use it in schoolmen. And so I had them interview, document, write notes, and sort of write their essays. And so one of the things that was interesting was that he said that he learned his mom was washing clothes in the river when she was 10. And he said, I never knew that about my mom, that she would be washing clothes to make money to provide and help her family in Mexico at the same age that he is now. And so I think for him, that kind of was this really kind of surreal moment that helped him sort of appreciate and understand his mom a little bit differently. So, but I thought it was just cute that he said, I never really listened that closely, but this is what I learned about my mom. So I think those kind of things, you know, that's one little example of the things that I think inspire me or keep me going, and is helping youth see and helping teachers see those stories in youth themselves.
So just a short story. So my mother just got naturalized about a week and a half ago. So I thought it was pretty nice. I unfortunately wasn't able to be there, but she did, one, send me a ton of photos, and she's smiling ear to ear. Second, she chastised me for not being able to go, even though, so she was like, well, why am I here? So anyway, she was like, she didn't want to help, but anyway, she was. No, but it's been 17 years, almost to the day that she first came to the U.S. So I think it was actually nice to see how she's gone from someone who worked double shifts at a gas station when she was starting out here to now she's pursuing her bachelor's and now is an American citizen. So.
I guess something that, a little story that was kind of rewarding was one of the kids who originally did not have like the funds to treat his mental illness is now like doing a lot better, and he's like back in school, which originally like his mom said that was never in his like path. So I guess it's kind of nice to like hear the reward that like there was a change that we were able to provide, and it's being clearly shown. Like he's back in school, he's getting his treatments, his physical therapy, and just like that's just a reward enough for us to know that like his path has changed through the little thing that we were able to do for him.
Okay, well that's a great way to end. Thank you all so much for coming. Please join us.